Shenanigans. Apparently, there might have been some chicanery in the New Hampshire Democratic primary election, which I'm not going to lie, most of us probably shouldn't be that surprised. Although it is kind of surprising because New Hampshire has been known to be one of the more secure states in the primary elections and in the general elections as well. But today I have with me to discuss a fellow election integrity activist, a member of the MCSC network, an on-the-ground reporter, an organizer. I mean, the man's a jack of all trades, quite honestly. I have with me today Pasta Jardula to talk about this and to talk about some shenanigans we've been seeing in LA. What's going on, Pasta? How you doing, bro?
Good, and I just want to say for the record, I organize the best pasta dinners if you ever get a chance.
It's true. That man be putting on a show. But usually it's only during football season, man. He ain't really riding out for the Kaepernick wave like he should be. I'm just kidding. Look, he a Jets fan.
I can step up my game, Niko. I can step it up.
You can say that? All right. So, let me just say, man, I miss you guys, dog. It's been a couple days since I seen you, dog. I don't know, I'm doing out here by myself. I'm in this warm weather. It's hard enjoying this warm weather without you, but I'll figure it out. But in all seriousness, that night in New Hampshire, we were having a pretty riveting discussion about the potentiality for election integrity issues because we were all kind of confused as to how Bernie could be just utterly demolishing not only Buttigieg, but everybody in New Hampshire up until the three counties, the largest counties with voting machines, AccuVote voting machines were counted. And then all of a sudden he goes from being it was 29% to like 21% to pulling in and almost tying him. And he did tie him, in fact, in delegates. So during that discussion, I had actually mentioned that what they will do is they can rig it, and they will rig it in such a way that, it looks like Bernie won, but you won't ask any questions. And they're hoping that you will not ask any questions or ask for an audit because then it may be honestly, might just be super easy to prove that there's an issue. Well, it seems like that issue has arisen, son, because I saw that you reported yesterday that there's some chicanery in New Hampshire. Can you elaborate on what you and Fiorella reported on?
Well, we always talk about open source, closed source systems and whatnot, being that it's, no proprietary software in any of these machines. Now, the New Hampshire voting system doesn't necessarily have closed source or open source in their voting. There's a little marker like a Scantron, but it's their counting mechanism, okay? The counting mechanism is a closed source piece of product. In other words, there's proprietary software in there that we're not allowed to look at. And in the areas where they used this particular counting system, certain candidates were lower than others. Really, and we had to look at the exit polls, which really shed some light onto the system. So once again, it gets back to the election integrity, what's open source, what's closed source. And, the counting mechanism in this situation this time seemed to have gotten us.
So what did you find in the exit polling? What was the discrepancy?
Well, I mean, I saw there was a couple exit polls that had discrepancies of close to 10%, way outside the margin. And once again, we had friends, boots on the ground. There was a lot of people who went to a lot of these polling spots where when they had the handwritten and the counted by hand, because it was smaller, what's the precincts?
Yeah.
The counts were a lot different than the overall results that came out at the end of the day. So in other words, certain mechanisms, that were used for counting that once again had the closed source favored a Pete Buttigieg and put down a Bernie Sanders and a Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah, and there was one precinct where, the one that we could see anyway. Of course, everybody, we can't use that as the grand rule, but there was a precinct where Tulsi was beating everyone except the top three, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Everyone, even Klobuchar Warren, didn't do well in that district. But this was a district where Tulsi could afford to have an observer watch the hand counted votes. Now, Pasta was actually there. So we had been talking about this AccuVote voting machine since maybe 4 days before the election. Yeah. I covered it here. Pasta, being an election integrity activist himself, Fiorella, the same thing, asked me like, okay, so what did you learn about these election or these machines? Where they're going to be used at? And I was explaining, I'm like, I'm not as worried about the hand counted paper ballots outside of those counties that are not using the AccuVote machine. What I'm worried about are the 3 or 4 that do, because they are the largest counties. They have the most, the most votes to give up, right?
Yeah.
And it will be the hardest to detect because it isn't just about giving votes to Pete. The numbers do have to match up ultimately. Like the amount of ballots cast still have to match up to the voting machine. So they can take votes away from people like Yang, away from people like Tulsi. And with the AccuVote machine, you can literally take a SIM card or a memory card and hack it that way, and it's almost undiscoverable, the hack is. So in a situation like what you're describing, most states, like New York, for example, it says that if the exit polling has a discrepancy of more than 2%, you cannot register those elections.
No, not at all. I mean, and that's the thing. They've been trying to get away from these exit polls. Remember when last election cycle in 2016, MSNBC and CNN just said, we're going to stop doing it. Why? Because they were getting themselves exposed to the election fraud that was taking place all around the country. And I think the important thing to really know, Niko, if you're about election integrity, you got to understand that they're going to hit you in multiple ways. You know what I'm saying? They're always going to mess with your registration. That's the first way they get you. You know what I'm saying? But the object is to move people into provisional ballots or just completely discredit their vote. And as you said, I think you said to me the other day, if you add up all the establishment candidates and Bernie Sanders, he's still behind. Why? Because they shave a little here, they shave a little there. You know, it's not a full-on threat of like, we're just going to wipe these out. But they pick their areas, they pick their spots, and they are being very effective right now in all states. You know what I'm saying? So far, 2 states down, 2 reasons to say, okay, wait, there's questions to be asked. We shouldn't be having anything that is closed source, that has proprietary software. Even in the case of New Hampshire, which you said, they're known for having pretty, good elections. They have completely open source in their handicap voting. You know what I'm saying? So they need to go a step further. And until we kick this in the butt, you know what I'm saying, you could expect them to shave off a lot of votes from Bernie. And also, what they don't want Tulsi to get any momentum, because realistically, any delegates that Tulsi gets at the end of this, they're going to Bernie Sanders. So they have to shave off her votes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's more than just about giving giving delegates to Bernie. It's about getting that delegate to get on that debate stage, getting that delegate to stay relevant in the polls, getting that delegate to get those interviews. And the more delegates she gets, the more relevant she becomes, the more people listen to her message. So when she's calling out election rigging and election integrity issues, which she's been known to do, when she's calling out other candidates, which she's been known to do, if she ends a career or two, which she has been known to do, that becomes very problematic for the establishment. I like what you said in the video that we did earlier, where you said even if Tulsi gets, for example, 40 delegates, that could be a make or break for Bernie if you are a Bernie supporter. And it could also be make or break for Tulsi as a VP, being a VP pick or being a potential future presidential nominee, by being able to say, like, look, this is what happened when we persevered. Imagine what could happen when we have the rest of the Bernie Sanders movement behind us, without having to compete with that same base. So now, what I noticed in some of these exit polls, I don't know if you saw the same thing, but what I've noticed is that Bernie almost obliterated Pete in every county except for one, if we're not talking about the places that use the AccuVote machine. But all the places where the AccuVote machine was used, Bernie either basically tied Buttigieg, and I think 2 of the 3 counties, Buttigieg actually won. I don't know, did you see that too?
We were looking at that. We kind of mentioned that too as well. And once again, that's why we put our hands up and start screaming about in the open source versus closed source. And I understand there's a lot of election integrity activists that want to strictly go to hand paper counted ballots. You know what I'm saying? And I think that would even be better than the system we have right now. But this is a really and also, Niko, it's a 2-step. It's a 1-2 punch. It's the election, the engineering of our elections, which they are doing, again, right in front of our very own face, and then the controlling of the media, the keys to the kingdom, suppressing our voices, and also putting forth their voices. When I said the other day I have lost a little faith in humanity, it was from some of the people that I met in New Hampshire that were saying, oh, I don't know who to vote for, Pete Buttigieg or Tulsi Gabbard, that military-minded people. But the fact is, that they're going full front. They're suppressing our voices while throttling theirs and putting their own voices up. They're swaying some votes their way. That's why civil liberties and election integrity have to come first. Then we can go after all the things we want to do, whether it be a Green New Deal or Medicare for all or ending the regime change wars. But this has to be dealt with first, because right in front of your very own eyes, burners, you're getting cheated again.
Yep. And it's funny that you've mentioned that, because there were people who said, well, I'm a veteran, so Buttigieg or Tulsi. What? Okay, there's no way you could possibly think that if you were paying attention to the entire election. But they're going off of what they saw, the little bit they saw from her, and then a lot of what they saw from Buttigieg, and they think that Buttigieg has a legitimate chance of winning, because otherwise the mind would naturally incline that I'm seeing him more, so he probably has a better chance of winning. And that's what they do. We encountered how many people that were like, man, I really like Tulsi, but I also like Amy Klobuchar.
Yeah, I mean, a lot. And even the oldest lady in Hart's location, when we went up to that voting, which was amazing, it was so awesome, she voted for Tom Steyer, but she liked Tulsi a lot. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Once again, this other factor, now this is just...
Remember the daughter voted for Warren, she loved Tulsi.
Yes. Well, she voted for Warren because the student debt getting wiped out, and Yang got a lot of votes because in that area, their rent's probably $400 a month, $1,000 takes care of all their bills, and they're set. You know what I'm saying? But
and I'm glad you brought that up, because she did bring up the student debt getting wiped out. And here's what's interesting about that. So this woman voted for Warren because of Bernie's policy that has been assigned to Warren by the mainstream media, and she liked Tulsi. So what we are seeing, remember how we've been saying over and over again, stop pushing this idea and enabling the message of the mainstream media that somehow Warren is even close to Bernie Sanders, when they're not, because this is what it leads to. And she's just unwitting. She didn't know that vote was not a good vote for what she was claiming she wants, but she can only go off the information she has. And so that was also problematic. And I'm glad you brought up disinformation, because I do have another question. Pasta, when we interviewed that poll worker, who seemed like a nice enough guy, right? Seemed very confident in all the answers he was giving us. What did he tell us about the AccuVote machine?
Well, the whole thing is we asked a plethora of questions like we always do. We kind of went through it with a comb, asking this and that. In fact, I got back some news. Is my microphone working okay, Niko? Can you hear me?
So I can hear you, but it doesn't sound like you're speaking into the shore. I didn't even think about it, but yeah, I guess so.
Maybe I'm not. Maybe the shore's not up there. But anyways, I'll talk really loud so people can hear me.
We can hear you. It just doesn't sound as crisp as it usually does. We'll fix it after this segment.
So, short story long, we asked them everything. We went through everything with a fine comb, you know what I'm saying? And somebody just sent to me, I was very concerned about the ballot rotation, because in LA, I know they're supposed to rotate the ballot. In other words, we saw a lot of ballots where Amy Klobuchar was on top, and, Tulsi and Bernie were down below. Somebody sent me a ballot where Tulsi Gabbard was on top, so I was happy to see that was taken care of, because the registrar from New Hampshire, his assistant, hasn't gotten back to me yet. But the thing that was alarming at most, because the guy was saying, oh, it's not hackable, it's not hackable. However, there's a SIM card that goes into the machine. And, I really didn't realize how bad it was until Johnny broke it down to me, and you broke it down to me about what a SIM card can do. Act as almost like a modem of sorts. It's a brain. So at this point right now, they can fix anything. Our elections are not secure. They're owned by corporations, and we need to kick this in the butt now. When you're getting nervous in a town like New Hampshire, which once again, Niko, you said is normally a lot more solid when it comes to their elections, especially in Florida, New York, and California, you got a lot of questions to be raised because it's a scary time.
Yeah, and let me just say, so when I walked up, they were already having the conversation, and they were asking some good questions. And I just kind of heard him say, oh, no, these machines are secure. These machines are secure. Mind you, I'm asking him a question I already know the answer to. So I said, so you're telling me that these machines cannot be hacked. Why are you saying this? He said, they can't be hacked because they can't connect to the internet. I said, and there's no way. So there's no way they're hackable. I remember everybody who saw this segment, I did a whole segment on how hackable these machines are and how most of the country does not use these machines, the AccuVote machine, specifically because of how hackable they are. And not only how hackable they are, but once again, how it is very hard to trace where they were hacked and how they were hacked. So I'm asking him this question. Say, well, there's no way. I said, so there's no way you can put a memory card in there or anything like that. He's like, well, yeah, you can put a memory card or a SIM card in there. Yeah, but you can't hack them through those. So this guy was well-meaning. He wasn't trying to mislead us. But what it shows you is that, once again, disinformation is so prominent. Like, somebody told him that to give us confidence, and because he had faith in that source, he didn't question it. Now imagine if Pasa Fiorella and Johnny were by themselves and they didn't. I hadn't talked about it. I hadn't mentioned it. Most people are under the impression, including myself before I did the research, that if you can't network the computers, then you cannot hack those computers. That's what the ongoing narrative has been, until I dug a little bit deeper and found out that that's not true. If they were by themselves, that we might have just accepted that as fact and went on about our business. But when we have a poll worker who seemed to be pretty damn educated on the process in New Hampshire, who was telling people what he did not know to be a lie, we have a serious problem within our electoral system, ladies and gentlemen. I do want to talk about, speaking of misinformation, disinformation, we have another scenario out there in LA that Pasa and Fiorella have been tracking very closely. Can you tell us about this ridiculous nonsense where basically a whistleblower revealed that it seems like LA County is trying their hardest to get people to get provisional ballots rather than a regular ballot to be cast in LA?
But Niko, they count all the provisional ballots. Niko, they count them.
Yeah, they count them all right. They count them somebody else.
Yeah. By definition, a provisional ballot is a ballot that has not had enough authorization to be passed and counted. It needs furthermore credit. It needs furthermore looking into it. I mean, it's anything but legit. And that's what they did last time in LA. They did, and once again, several tactics. They're going to put out a net and use all different things. Right now, we're noticing, and we've just unpacked what a poll worker came to talk to us. He was just so distraught from what he experienced from a training session, and he reached out to us. We brought him on, Mr. John Doe. The video is up there, definitely. I think it's getting a lot of play on both our channels, and it's serious because they're using the same technique. Back in 2016, when TYT was good, they made a video. I think you're in the beginning of it when you say we need to shut the election down. One of the tactics they use is to keep all the poll workers incompetent, untrained, not knowing what's going on. So when this gentleman showed up and asked question after question after question, he was met with bullying techniques and told to just shut up and know his place. And that's what they try to do. So that's how they're going to attack it then, because what they do then is they direct everybody into a provisional ballot. Now, the registrar has been going around talking about this new system, and just to bring a little light to the situation, this is one of the biggest elections of all time, right? We're going with a new system right off the bat. In LA County, and it is scary as can be, because not only is the whole machine hackable, which was proven by Alex Padilla, the Secretary of State, his independent report, there's multitude of problems with these machines. For instance, the jamming mechanism, by law, you only are allowed to have a machine that jams once out of every 500 times. Well, these jam once out of every 100 times. Literally, 5 times the rate of what's legal, yet they're allowing it to go. Also, these ballots, these boxes inside the machine, they only hold 200, they're supposed to hold 250, but around 200. So can you imagine in LA how often these things got to be open, whatnot? And that was another thing Mr. John Doe, our poll worker, revealed to us. They're not giving him the proper training on how to open these things and seal these things, because there's scanners and seals when you cut open a box. They're not training him on this, so only the leads can grab this and get their hands on that. They're called leads, the ones who are out there training. The registration. They've been going around. Jeff Klein, who is Dean Logan's assistant, which Dean Logan is a criminal, okay? He had issues in King County where he stole governor's elections, and then Padilla hires him, should have never been hired in the first place, has led a misinformation campaign. The whole thing about this system in the new voting centers is, hey, guess what, Niko? You come here day of, you can change your registration. So therefore you can vote. But what they don't tell you is that if you change your registration on the day of, you get a provisional ballot. And on the next election, you get a regular ballot. So they're obfuscating everything. And also, the other thing is, LA has this one town. When it came to our KDEM elections, they complained, the establishment, oh, we shouldn't sit there and ID people. That's very a Republican thing to do. So they kind of had that same kind of mentality when it came to the election. But guess what, Niko? If you changed your registration since the last election, you just got to bring ID. But not only just you have to bring ID, you have to have a verified, correct address ID. So for me, if I show up to show my
Which
ID,
is a big deal in LA, y'all. People move around a lot.
a lot. And my ID doesn't have the right address on it, my driver's license. So I'm going to bring another bill. But can you imagine how many people who show up? I'll be, all right, well, I'll take the provisional or whatever. Provisionals don't get counted. I mean, some of them might. I'm not going to argue the situation. I think a lot of them didn't get counted last time. But these are the nefarious actions.
Okay, so I'm going to put it like this, just for practicality purposes, right? They're provisional, which means they're under... They will be counted under the provision that they are proven eventually to be a legitimate ballot cast. Absolutely. That shit is completely irrelevant because they're going to announce the winner that night, and your ballot will not. This is giving the benefit of the doubt. It may get cast, but what they are trying to do is manufacture a low voter turnout. They know that the people who excite the most, the candidates that excite the most people, will likely benefit from a higher voter turnout in newly registered voters. What this does is it manufactures a low voter turnout so that even if those ballots are eventually counted, and hell, let's be very clear about something, in 2016, almost, I would say damn near a fourth of the bitches were not counted. Yeah. Still, to this day. Yeah. They will declare a winner that night. They will assign delegates that night, and it will be up to candidates to pursue or to decide whether or not to pursue an audit, which, to be quite frank, bro, winning an audit in California is going to be a bitch. Yeah. It's rigged in so many different ways. It's going to be almost impossible.
They run out the clock, Niko. They have 2 million votes to count in a week, and they maybe get through 1 million of them. They throw some away, they count some, and then that other million that was out there gets thrown in the trash. I mean, it was close to, I said it's close. It's anywhere from 3/4 of a million to 1 million votes were definitely not counted. And you can do this simply by just going through every single primary. If you look at 2008, how many votes there were to 2000, and from 2000 to 1992, each time in California, it increased by over 22%, sometimes up to 30%. So you really want to tell me that in 2016, there was as many votes as there were in 2008, and your excuse was, well, Obama was a rock star. No. 750,000, 675,000 new registered voters 6 weeks before the California election. We know they were registered for Bernie, and guess what? They were not counted.
And let's be clear about one thing, bro. If they are able to rig California, and I listen, I'm just saying, it's being realistically speaking, until somebody starts with a bigger platform than us starts blowing the whistle on this. Like, we have plenty of people with TYT lives in LA. Like, most of them live out there. You have Jimmy, I know, has been blowing the whistle on this for quite some time, but we need a coalition of independent people who live out there who can blow the whistle to say, look, do not take that goddamn provisional ballot. Raise hell. Yeah. Raise hell. Yeah. And it will make the news. It will make the news. They will come under scrutiny. Like you saw the way that these Iowa people were like, okay, this shit's suspect. Let me record these coin flips. Let me record these outcomes. Let me take a picture of these results, because I don't know exactly how this is off, but I know that something feels off. Just like people were smart enough to write down the results in New Hampshire, and people started taking a look at the exit polling and the discrepancies there. Like we were smart enough to look up the AccuVote machine and figure out that it only is used in certain counties, and of course those are the counties, one of the most hackable machines. Those are the counties that there's the biggest discrepancies. We need people to be smart enough to say, if they get a provisional ballot, fuck that. Don't take it. Raise hell. The worst they're gonna do is kick. I promise you, bro. The worst they're gonna do is kick you out. But if enough people raise hell about this provisional ballot, the right people get on the hot seat, and it will bring enough attention that Bernie or Tulsi can say, okay, now that this many people are calling foul, like in Iowa, they can get involved and say, okay, so let's audit this shit and see what's really going on. and maybe, just maybe, we can salvage some semblance of democracy in that state. But we really got to start calling it out now. So
I gotta tell you something, Niko, too.
Go ahead.
Make you more depressed, because now we don't have precincts. Now, election integrity activists know that precincts are good, because that's where we can track back the nefarious actions. We can pinpoint exactly where Niko House voted in that precinct, make sure his signature matches up, and start working to make sure to look at his ballot. They have these vote centers, so you can go to any one. So now the precinct is eliminated, which is a dangerous thing. And it's checked in through a computer, right? And we tested the system. We voted in one spot. We went to another spot to see if we could vote, and they caught us and said, oh, you voted at the other spot. So we know there's internet going around. Here's the thing, Niko. If you're in a precinct, there's a precinct captain, right? You can bitch and complain, and they'll probably give you a ballot. In some situations where it's way off, they might send you to Norwalk. Well, now it's a computer system. And if the computer system says, does this person have valid ID? You hit no. There's no one that I know of that can override it and give you that ballot. In other words, in this situation, you might have to go to Norwalk. And
where's Norwalk?
One of the screwiest situations, because there's not that precinct captain necessarily that can override the system. Unless Dean Logan comes now and tells me something different. This guy's like Elizabeth Warren. He's flip-flopping all over the fucking place. The bait and switch was disgusting what they did, because that's why they sold this situation, to get away from provisional ballots. But it's not the case. So even more discrepancies. And like I said, Niko, we haven't even gotten to the hacking part of what these machines could do.
Yeah, you know? We haven't even gotten to the fucking machines yet. Lord Jesus.
And right now we got 6 situations in which they can screw you. So there'll be another 4 right after. And not only that, the counting, the way they're going to count this whole situation, I don't know how they're going to do it. And it's going to be longer lines like there were in Arizona, where they closed down these polling places because we got less voting centers. And these are new machines. They're going to jam like it's out of style.
Yep, because they haven't been broken in.
Nope.
That's so true. All right, man. So that's all we got for this. And of course, Pasta and Fiorella will update you all the more we find out about that situation. We're going to do some more digging into New Hampshire to figure out exactly how, if we start seeing some numbers not adding up, listen, they've had to take the votes from somewhere. And I would be more than willing to bet that Yang and Tulsi were 2 of the people that were having votes taken away from them to funnel into Pete Buttigieg, right? I think it's a pretty safe bet. And so we're going to keep an eye on that situation as well. Get out, go fight, go ask questions, go investigate. Bro, if you're in California, don't take that damn provisional ballot. Do not take it. It's going to be a long, long, long week in California, I promise you. But hey, we're going to try to...
I'm getting arrested, Niko. Hell no, and I ain't going to Norwalk.
Where the hell's Norwalk?
Well, Norwalk's a city about 30 miles away, about 25 miles away.
Oh, my God. In LA time, that's like forever.
Yeah,
oh my
literally,
God.
We'd have to go down for hours, whatnot. But, I'm not going to take this sitting down. And this is some bullshit. I've been to many meetings with the registrar's assistant. They sold this whole system as that you could change your party preference the day of, but they never told you you're going to get a provisional ballot if you're not registered by the 18th. And more
not counted on the same day.
Yeah.
And those are not counted on the same day, people. Do not take a provisional ballot. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for tuning into that live stream segment of Mika Says Casa. Appreciate you sticking around, Pasta. And always remember, more than anything else, people, find your balance. Peace.